So, welcome to the podcast, Hudney, and welcome everyone as well. This is the BugBase Security Podcast, wherein we're interviewing cybersecurity veterans and learning from their experiences, learning from whatever their insights are in the industry after working for so long. Today we have on the podcast Hudney Piquant. You guys have heard of Synack and Synack Red Team. Hudney actually went from being a Synack Red Team engineer to actually working at Synack as a solutions architect engineer. He has over 13 years of experience in the security space, graduated from Rochester, has a master's as well, and was recently a speaker at B-Sides Ahmedabad, along with a couple of talks at Black Hat as well. So really, really nice to have you, Hudney.
Oh, yeah, appreciate it.
So, Hudney, why don't you start off by telling us and telling everyone in general, right, what red teaming is? Because I think in general, everyone has a different view of it. Most people don't know how it's done. Many people think it has to be always done in a team. What is red teaming, and generally, how do you go about it?
Yeah, I think the three confusing things are vulnerability assessment, pen testing, and then red team. The red team obviously is a bit more, it's for sure mature, more sophisticated, more focused. You have more time. And the thing that is really good about it, because it's one thing, okay, what is it? But what's the advantage of it? The advantage of it today is that right now the pen testing it's like a methodology, right? You already know that, okay, this is what I want done. I want to make sure that I'm following compliance and all those kind of things, which is fine. That's great. But now there comes a time when you want to start maturing in what you're doing in your organization, because the adversary is maturing. So you want to basically match yourselves with them to compete. So the thing that's good about red teaming is, one, you don't necessarily have like a 2-week set time. Red teaming is, even if it's 6 months to 6 months, you have more time, okay? You have more intricate focus points that you're doing. It's not just about web application, I'm trying to get in. You have a particular area that you're trying to focus on, something that's like out of the ordinary, right? So for example, like let's say you wanted to test out if somebody can get into your organization through the network on the wall, right? Now, you can have some tools to protect that, but what's nice about red team is red team will say, like, even if you have those necessary tools, with a red team engagement, we have time to orchestrate something that's going to manipulate what you already have set in place. But we have time to do that, whether it's doing like a Mac spoof to get a Mac address that is the phone address, which the organization is gonna know that Mac address as the phone, but really you're a laptop. These are red team type of engagements where you're just going out of the ordinary, the typical normal steps that you would follow, the typical methodology, right? So they're just very like unique type of missions, as opposed to the typical methodology framework. Is how I like to look at it,
So, Hudney, I get a bit of that, and I believe the general type of organization that you'd be working with would be a very mature company. But in general, what we've seen is, most mature companies often have a bug bounty program as well. And, as you mentioned, moving beyond the bookish compliance, VAPT, or penetration testing, there are two ways to look at things, right? Either you do a red team engagement, or you host a bug bounty program. Do you feel that bug bounty is competitive against red teaming in any way? Or do you generally feel that both of them kind of go along each other idly in every organization?
Yeah, they're most definitely different still, because with the red team, typically most organizations may have like 6-man woman team of red teamers, and they cannot do every single thing. They need to focus on like what matters, right? But the thing is, they also can't scale. With the bug bounty, you can scale way better, right? Like, so if you have an asset and you have maybe 2 people looking at it versus 20 or 40, you get different results, and that's one thing that is now a game changer now. As a matter of fact, if you look at one of the organized crimes, Lockbit 3.0, it's kind of interesting. They put a post out there a few months ago, right, in around like June, and they basically said that we're looking to improve our ransomware as service model, right? Which that alone is hilarious. Like, as it's, I mean, it's a real business. You know,
Mhm.
I keep telling people I'm looking for them to just post jobs on LinkedIn one day. But they basically said that, hey, we want to improve our service, our model, you know, um, through the crowd. Like, want to reach out to the crowd, and I thought that was very interesting because they're doing the same model. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, they understand that you need a crowd of people to get things done today because it's a better
No.
investment. It's
Mhm.
a better return because you have more data you can get from that engagement. So uh, now they're starting to be like kind of like an awareness of you still need both, I would say. And I would say like even at Synack, what we tell our customers is we're not trying to replace the red team. We're just trying to be augment. Like we're just trying to basically help, you know, with your already security posture that you have. We're
Makes
just trying to
sense.
enhance. Yeah.
Makes sense, Hudney. So I had a general question about this, right? When you, so you know the part wherein it's really, or any firm is kind of crowdsourcing their entire malware on its own is really hilarious, right? But considering the way these AV vendors are also, upskilling themselves, having some kind of engagement like this may help them in hiring those guys as well potentially. So that was also very interesting. But I was always wondering, in a red team engagement, are you always working against a blue team, or are you just looking at entering the organization with their existing, kind of controls that they have in place? Is it a blue team versus red team engagement, or a red team is generally just, directly hit the organization, get all accesses you can?
No, it's most definitely both. And
Mhm.
I would say for the blue team, it's kind of a two-piece because you want to make sure that um, that the internal is good, like as far as what the blue team is doing as far as their defense, but you also want to improve the blue team, right? Like
Mhm.
it's actually a partnership where you might basically like try to focus on like, you know, TTD. Sometimes, you know, you just want to focus on how long did it take for the blue team to detect what I'm doing.
Ah,
Not about can
got
you
it.
see it, how long did it take? Because it's one thing to see it, okay, that's fine, but it's another thing to measure how long it took. Because if it took long to see it, that's a problem. Even if you
Mhm.
see it, when did you see it? Because if you saw it too late, it's too late.
Mhm.
So you're always trying to also tune how fast you can see, you know, the attack. But then also naturally, you're also looking at your organization in its own right, in a sense of like, so it's adversary, it's the red team, the blue team, that's one. And then it's actually the red team to the actual real adversary. Because you want to act like the adversary coming into your organization as if you're the adversary to see like what you can find.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying? Sometimes when you're internal, you're kind of biased. It's hard to kind of like see things from the right
Mhm.
perspective. So you need to
Right.
bring in that adversarial perspective outside. So not only do you need to be helping the blue team as far as when you're on the red team, but you also need to be coming from an adversary perspective as if you're the real adversary
So,
and say, hey,
Hardney, sometimes, as you mentioned, you're acting as a real adversary. I think the biggest database of how real adversaries have gone about attacking companies is on the Meter database, right? So, how often do you go about actually recreating those techniques compared to actually coming up with your own unique techniques that may be bypassing current existing solutions? Or is it generally a mix of both?
yeah, you want to do both. Like you want to replicate what they're doing because naturally you want to basically replicate, like especially like if you have that technology in your environment, you want to replicate it the exact same way. But then you also on the on the side want to be able to tweak just to kind of see like how different things respond, right? Because the truth is when you see what the attackers are doing, sometimes you're learning from them, and it's like, wait a minute, I didn't even think that was possible. Oh, let me see what I can do with that. You know, so it's good to do both. You most definitely want to do both. But of course, sometimes you need time to do that. I understand, like it's a lot of leg lift sometimes.
But as I would imagine, right, when you're going about doing such kind of an engagement, what happens if the blue team, like, it stops you midway, right? Do you just call it a success for the blue team, or do you keep hacking or trying other strategies until you're able to break through? Basically, what are the general terms of the engagement, right? When do you guys call it quits? When do you stop?
Yeah, like it really just depends on what we deem as this is how we want to do it. But typically, um, the two ways that I've seen done in the past that I've worked in is you do it where you stop after it's detected so that they can analyze and then remediate and then just kind of see like if there's anything that needs to be tweaked. But then also is, hey, just keep going until you find something, or keep going for 2 weeks straight and see what we find for the 2 weeks. Yeah.
Got it. And generally, in these kinds of engagements, from what I've read, from what I've studied as well, the initial attack vector is mostly phishing, is it? So what I want to understand is, a bug bounty engagement wherein the phishing is almost always banned, right? Compared to a red team engagement when phishing is, of course, used often as the initial attack vector. How do you think it works, right? To get an initial attack vector, would a red team or a malicious actor actually sit down and try to identify a vulnerability in a system to get initial access? Or, a real threat actor would honestly just try a phishing campaign and spray and maybe one thing works. What would a threat actor do, right?
Yeah, like a real threat actor, like, he would first engage in the times, right? Like, let's say we're just talking about COVID. He's going to focus on doing an engagement that's going to be towards COVID because it's very real time. It's very relevant. It's going to get the most success, So that's the focus, is first find something that's relative for today that typically somebody's going to fall for, right? And then, once you have your, so as you know that you have your target, that's the first phase. And the second thing is, when that occurs, I'm able to now get my initial foothold in there. You have to understand the company too. Like, you have to understand what would bother the company. Because just because you get in, it doesn't mean that's a success. Like, is there a particular asset that maybe makes the most money for this company that if we disturb this site, that particular asset can't be down for even 2 seconds. So they know that if I get that asset down, more than likely they will pay me my ransom. That's the kind of way to look at it, is what's the most impact? Because
what's the most damage you can cause as a
what's the damage there? Like, you could find a vulnerability all day, and sometimes the company doesn't even care. It's like, okay, whatever. But if it's an impact, that's a different story. So
I completely agree. In fact, in the space of bug bounty, even if you look at the CVSS standard, right, a lot of those critical vulnerabilities in a CVSS standard would basically be, something that doesn't really have an impact towards the company. Yet there are so many companies that are, taking those CVSS scores as the basis in which they're resolving vulnerabilities because they just don't know, right? And if you have a bug bounty engagement with a company and you start giving those CVSS criticals, the P0 bounty, and then, the people will just be making infinite money, right? So I think the general awareness is also required in this space, right?
Oh yeah, it is. Like, when I talk to my clients for Synack, like I tell them that we're very flexible. Like, even though we produce a CVSS score, we will be flexible because we know that every industry and depending on your internal organization is just different. Right. So we have that flexibility to say, like, even though this is what the score says, we are willing to even change it because we want to make sure that we're, one of the things that I will say, like, the enterprise needs to really get on board is they need to start getting a bit more realistic with what's happening in the wild, right? Because, for example, you're just talking about the CVS score. Like, yeah, once they see that, they like it because it's like, boom, okay, here's what the score is. We'll give it to the auditors and everything is fine, right? We meet compliance, yes. And those things are great, right? It's good to lock your door. That's great. But then we need to really focus on what the adversary cares about, because the adversary does not care what you check box. Like, they don't care about that. So if we start sinking in what's actually happening in the real world, in the wild, it will help us understand how to approach certain things. Like, even with vulnerability management, what vulnerabilities matter versus the other, we have a better kind of direction of where we're going to go to based upon what's happening in the wild. Because when we just go by compliance, it's not the best way to look at big picture, of everything.
So no, I completely agree, right? That makes sense. And I think that's just a general awareness that will slowly enter the security field. I think already compared to a couple of years back, it's improved very much, wherein companies are realizing that compliance is actually not the goal. The goal is to actually have something that can protect their organization against a real malicious actor who's coming in and trying to hack stuff up, right? But one thing I'm really curious to ask is that you can come in as a red team, have a phishing campaign, break stuff, but from an organizational perspective, right? Say if they have a blue team is great, but at the end employee level, right? How do you educate them? How do you train them to a point wherein they don't fall for things like this? Because of course the red team is going to come and prepared, right? They're going to do their reconnaissance. They're going to have some kind of a payload that's going to bypass whatever AV that the company has in place. So for an employee at the end, at the root level for a company, right? How do you educate them to look out for these things? Or is it the blue team's responsibility at the end of the day, or the SOC's responsibility?
Yeah, this is my passion right now is figuring this thing out, right? Because typically what we do is we do training videos, right? And we have these different things that we talk about, but it's hard because everybody is different, right? Everybody falls for different things. Every department is different. So I particularly, it's funny because I call this layer 8, because the attackers are not going for the humans because it's the better return of investment. To me, it needs to be a lifestyle. So for example, now a lot of us are working from home. Now, what you do at home matters, what you're doing for your organization, right? Because now you're doing VPNing from your home to the organization's network, to connect to the servers. So the thing is, I believe that this has to start at home. And I'm talking about in a sense that, for example, right? One of the things that we're pushing is network segmentation in the corporations. If people have an understanding of what that really means, they can start at their home first. So for example, if you have in your home a smart TV, it's going to have an IP address. Back in the day, no TV had an IP address. If you have a Nest controlling your AC and everything, it's going to have an IP address. Those are basically IoTs, right? Like in order for those things to be on your main network as well, that's not good because an adversary can piggyback off of that, which a TV and a Nest, the manufacturer doesn't care about security. So they're not going to create a Samsung TV and think, oh, let's make this secure. No, we don't care about that. So the thing is, if that device is on your network and it's not, it doesn't have that segmentation, that's not going to be a good thing. So if we could promote things like, for example, put these devices on a guest network, isolate it from your main network, it has to start out, right? So then once it's a lifestyle, now it's not just, oh, I'm at work today, let me focus security. No. I always want to focus security. So for example, we're talking about phishing, right? Phishing doesn't necessarily only happen through email anymore. Now it's what we call smishing. A lot of it's happening via text.
Right.
Now, your text, you're on your phone doing things for work as well. But when you're on your text, when you're on your phone, you could be anywhere in the world, right? Like you could be like going to the grocery store, you're in line, and you just see a link and you're not thinking, you click on it because you're not thinking security. So it needs to be like a lifestyle, and that's just what I've been promoting. It just can't be at the organization. It has to be a lifestyle. Like it has to be something that, unfortunately, just the way it is today, we live in an information age. We have to like live this thing out so we can actually implement it to really organize. So that means that it's not just the blue team that's helping the employee. It's actually another employee that's helping another employee. It has to be a lifestyle because it's just too many open doors that attackers can use. There's just too many. So for example, right, like the Uber attack, right? Like, yes, he was able to get into the internal network, right? But this is the thing. How did he do it? He did it. We call it MFA fatigue. He fatigued that employee to the point where he just had to click allow on his phone. You can't just train for that. Like you just have to, like, it has to be a lifestyle,
I think in general, it's the hacker mindset, right? Wherein, we have trained and, worked in this space for such a while wherein whenever I'm clicking on a link or whenever I'm clicking anywhere or downloading any file, I'm extremely suspicious about it, right? And that's just become a lifestyle for us. Now, getting that in the mind of common people who are doing, day jobs, maybe jobs that they don't even like, but potentially, cause the entire organization to fall down. is something challenging, right? So, hats
It
off to
is.
you for
It's
actually
very
putting in
challenging.
work to actually get that done, right?
Oh yeah. And the thing what I've been telling people is like, although they don't have the mindset for it because they're not in cyber, but what I do tell them is that they already have the mindset for danger. They
Mm-hmm.
can sense when danger is happening. So now we just need to basically, transfer that to cyber.
Mm-hmm.
And once we do that, they'll be able to detect danger very easily because they already do it in real life for other things. It's just that they need to do it for cyber now. So it's not
True.
going to be a heavy lift. It's just a transfer of, okay, now implement that in the cyberspace.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. But it needs to be a lifestyle because they need to be familiar that when they pick up their phone, they're susceptible.
Mm-hmm.
They need to understand that because now the phone is like, you do most things on your phone today, right? So it's just a lifestyle. Unfortunately, it's gonna have to be a lifestyle. It can't be like a pocket thing. It has to be like in your everyday life. We're not even talking about what's those vehicles, the autonomous vehicle. We're not even talking about that yet. Like once that gets really implemented, that's gonna be a whole nother thing because that's gonna be a laptop on wheels.
Right.
So yeah, it's gonna have to be a lifestyle. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is because we're living in the information age. So once we get the lifestyle aspect, it's going to be very hard for the adversary now. It's going to be very hard for them because now, instead of just using your tools as sensors in the organization, now your humans, now your workers, they're going to
Mm-hmm.
be sensors. Can you imagine dealing with that? Like, that's going to be tough. When you have the human actually being able to detect these things themselves, it's going to be really tough because the Verizon data breach report, you know, as far as like breaches, like 18% goes to tools. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's gonna get any better. That's good. Like, but 85% is humans as far
Yep.
as like so the tools aspect, we're pretty good there. Like we don't need to like try to do better. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna need to do as good as you can get there, right? 18%, that's pretty good. But let's make the human sensors too. You
Mm-hmm.
see what I'm saying?
So, I mean,
That's
I completely, agree with that. In fact, if you look at it from a security perspective as well, I don't think tools have evolved or will evolve in the next couple of years to a point
no.
wherein they can detect vulnerabilities or attacks or anything at all to the level that humans can, right? I mean, this chat GPT has come in to an extent, which, I kind of tested out. You must have kind of played it around with it as well. But, yet I still feel that human intelligence, right, if we would put it, is the best, identifier for any kind of malicious activity because it's so intelligent, right? Now, training that mind to a point to detect that cyber from a cyber perspective as well is something I guess you're already working on and will come
Oh yeah.
as we embrace
That's yeah, I
technology
want to attack
more
that.
and more.
Yeah, I want to attack that for 2023. I really want to attack that. I've been trying to focus on that a little bit. Even at the talk in India, I did some talk about it because uh like an MFA fatigue attack, it's a real attack, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a psychological attack.
Yep.
That's psychological, you know. So we got to deal with that.
No, true, 100%, and I think we're on the right track with it. Certainly, I wanted to ask you a couple more. I think closing points. I guess everyone in India is always interested about these questions, right? Of course, you've of course achieved a lot in the cybersecurity space. For someone who's just starting out, right? What is your advice to them?
Yeah, my advice to them is to, I'll be honest, it is hard to sometimes figure out where you're going to start in cybersecurity because there's a lot of paths, right? So typically, I like to kind of like start with like, typically it's going to fall either in the offensive or blue or defensive, red team and
Mm-hmm.
blue team. Figure out what area there that you like, and the way to figure it out is you're going to have to kind of play around there, right? Read blogs, study some material, see where you gravitate to naturally. Um, that's one of the first things you want to do to kind of help you, figure out what path you want to go. You want to go on the blue team or the red team? You want to go offensive or do you like to defend? Because when you find that, it's going to be easier for you now to go down that path. Like whether you do certifications, whether you do like, conferences, they're going to be like, that's going to help you guide yourself where to go to. Because if you don't, you're going to be all over the place trying to figure out like
Mm-hmm.
what to do. As far as like the school versus certification and all that, honestly, like it really depends on how you are. Like me personally, I usually push for you're just gonna have to be a researcher. You're gonna have to learn how to learn because if you want to learn something, you go to school for it. The time that you're going to take to do that, it's just too long. Like school, it cannot scale in the way that we're moving very fast today, right? Like Coursera and Udemy went IPO. This is very like different now type of schooling. It's very like I want to just do this and that's it. So things are even changing in the realm of school and education, right? YouTube, we like to call it YouTube University. You can learn things there as well. But you most definitely want to figure out like what's your learning style. But I will say that it's probably going to be better to adopt the model of being a researcher, just learning how to learn. You know, having the ability to figure things out. Because when you go for a job, that's the kind of people they want, unfortunately. Like they want people that can figure things out, because it's not like you know what's going to happen next week. You know, so when something that's new comes and the manager knows that, well, my engineer, he has the ability to figure things out. That's what they want.
No, true. I think, we have a word in India for that called jugaad, which basically means just figuring it out and doing it, right? And I think the audience that will be looking at this podcast will really connect with what you just said. And that would be really, really, really helpful to them, right? But, in general, I did want to ask that I understand the researcher mindset, right? And having the ability to do the jugaad or figuring things out. But what I've seen a lot of security engineers, cut off on is they do a bit of try hack me, they pop a couple of shells. Mostly I've seen many of these younger guys start off with either something like a bug bounty, wherein they're only identifying low-hanging fruit, or do a bit of offensive security, penetration testing, network security. And after that, they just go into confusion, right? I don't think it's possible for anyone to actually start with defensive security. So what would you tell to someone who is at that point, right? Wherein, yeah.
It's you're right to say that. It's kind of like a combination of things, right? Because like true is okay, try hack me, try over the wire, hack the boxes, all these things, which are great. Honestly, they're like back in the day, we never had these things. Hub, things are fantastic, especially they're free, some of them. But the thing is, you want to have the big picture, right? So, you want to have soft skills, you want to have hard skills. And the reason for this is because you want to understand the business. What's happening is we're just focusing on technical thing and that's it. And the hackers, they don't just focus on technical things, they understand business. That's why they understand, okay, what's going to be the most impact for the business? Because again, like we're in an age now that if you want to pop and do an SQL injection, honestly, it's not that impressive, because you can go on YouTube and look at step-by-step how to do it. A 10-year-old can do it now. Like back in the day, you couldn't have that access, so it was different, but today is different. So a lot of attacks that are happening today, they're not like a lot of adversaries are doing attacks. They're not necessarily all super sophisticated, right? You can go on the dark web. There's a great market. You buy what you want to buy there. You just configure the tool a little bit, and then you execute. It's very quick. That's hard to compete with. So you want to have the business aspect too. So when you pop stuff, this is great. But now you want to focus on like, okay, my target, or even not just like the target, but let's say if I work for an organization, I should basically do an attack surface, look at what the organization looks like. Okay, what asset is generating the most money for me? I mean, for a company. But the problem is there's information that the hacker knows that even the people at the business don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, Gartner came out with in 2021, they came out with the EASM, External Attack Surface Management, which is great actually. But I mean, the hackers been knowing this since the 90s, right? So there's a lot to catch up on, but this is the thing. Hackers have their own version of ASM that they're not sharing. Right. They understand the business, they understand like the C-level, they understand everything about the company, their attack surface, and therefore now they're able to make more sense of an attack. So the attack, it's not just random, it's very purposeful, it's very intentional, it's very timely. They know when to do certain things because they understand how the business is operating, they understand the business needs. They may even look at, the business have been noticing the pattern of their acquisitions that they're doing. Let me actually attack one of those that they're getting ready to acquire, so that when the company now acquires them, I can just come in. There's those kind of mindset that you have to have now, is a lot of business focus as well, not just technical, but understand business.
No, I completely agree, Hudney. I think having that business logic is something that many people do lack. Many people are able to build out that technical ability, but once you have the business mind as well and can actually connect both of them, I feel, as you mentioned, that is where most of these security researchers will see success. And the resources for these, I guess, are all available online, right? I think you can go on naming many, I can go on naming many, but at the end of the day, it's the security researcher who is to identify those ones that work for them. But I think their goal on, I think you summed it up pretty well, should be looking at business once they figured out basic security, and then become a researcher and see how these go along, go along together, and kind of take it forward. But yeah, I think some great advice for the young guys out there who are trying to get into this space. That's all from my end. I thought I should stick to time. Booked your calendar for 45 minutes. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out and talk on our podcast. It was lovely speaking to you, Hudney, and looking forward to be in touch.
Oh yeah, for sure. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Awesome, man.